It's 6 o'clock, so let's kick off the study session of Urbana School District 116 for Tuesday, November 12th. Roll call, please.
Member Jones,
Here.
Member Hickson. Here. Member Baxley,
Here.
Member Staton, Member Langendorf here, Vice President Exum. Here. President Pulowski.
Here, are there any additions, corrections, or modifications to tonight's agenda? If any citizen wishes to make a statement before the board, please fill out a goldenrod sheet in the back of the room and hand it to our recording secretary, Lori Johnson, but there is absolutely no one in our audience tonight. So there will be no citizen statements. There is a call for an executive session following tonight's meeting. It was published in our agenda. It's for the purposes of personnel. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We have an agenda. First up tonight are accommodations for our employees who have served in the armed forces. Do you have a list?
You have it too, but I'm gonna.
Well, yours is marked because
Yes.
people didn't want it.
Yes. So you want me to read that?
Sure.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, I can,
Wait,
sure,
President,
I can do
we
it.
should do that.
So I'd like to acknowledge and thank the following individuals who have served in our armed forces and now serving are the students of Urbana School District 116. First up is Jerry Moreland from Urbana High School, Chris Moeller from UHS, Kevin Helmick from UMS, Charles Atterbury from UHS, Eric Rittman from Urbana High School, Lena Davis from UMS, Bradley Benner from Thomas Paine, Elizabeth Chin from King, Ryan Howell from Yankee Ridge, and Priscilla Kraut from UMS. We thank you for your continued service to this country and to this district. Your presence in this district honors us, so thank you.
And we will be delivering a small token of appreciation from administration and from the Board of Education for your service. I know we have other veterans out there who every year when we send out our survey, we miss you or you are unable to complete our survey who may have been recognized in your schools yesterday. So if you see me in the building and you would like us to acknowledge you and you maybe didn't fill the survey out, please let us know and stop me when we come around to make our deliveries this week. So again, thank you for your service.
So, Sitlali, do you have a report tonight? I know that you guys got back from Habitat this weekend, so I don't know if you guys had time to put a report together or not.
No, we did not.
Well, thank you for being here. We only have one agenda item tonight, and that's a study topic for the 23-24 Illinois School Report Card.
Okay. And I did want to say, Sitlali, Valentina, I don't know, you heard that she had a little accident, so I think she was in charge of the presentation, so she didn't have an opportunity to do that. But she is doing okay, and we're glad that she is fine, even though she's not here tonight with us. So I am going to drive. John and I are going to tag team this. So this is a little more of a comprehensive school report card presentation than we've shared with the board in the past. One of the reasons for that is we really wanted to highlight, some of the programs that we've been putting in place. And a good way to do that is to really talk about our why a little bit. And so as we walk through some of our data, you will see very clearly our why. And it'll be very evident, I think, to our community, to our stakeholders. I think our board is well aware of our why. Our why is very much grounded in student achievement. We have really been making some significant changes in the last 2 years, basically because it is very clear that we need to do some programming improvements in order and some just instructional changes. We've implemented some core curriculum. We've done some very heavy lifting in terms of redistricting, changing some student enrollment issues that we've had for several years. And we have moved some staffing, made some really significant changes in how we're delivering service to our students so we can impact our core instruction in a way more intentional way in the last year. And as we walk through the report card data, I think why we've made some of those changes are going to be really clear. We're seeing some gains, I think, which is a reason to be good. Those are good things, but I don't know that we're seeing things that are like really things that we're seeing these huge gains yet. I know we have great gains that are to come. We're seeing things that we're excited about in terms of, yes, we know our teachers are doing so much hard work. We just left a principals meeting just a few minutes ago where we met with our administrators and we acknowledged their hard work and their instructional leadership. And we recognize that implementing new math curriculum in 1 year and then turning around and implementing new language arts curriculum the very next year is very hard. So our teachers are learning a lot of new things. They're pushing themselves to the limits. And we appreciate their hard work, but we know that they're doing it on behalf of our students. And our role as educators is to make sure that our students can read, write, and do math and go on to do great things in the future. And this data is one of our stepping stones in moving in the right direction. We've not been as transparent and open, I think, in previous years about sharing this data in this way, which we need to do. We need to have been doing that more openly, I think, in years past, or it wouldn't have been such a shock when we needed to make some significant changes in the last 2 years, because I don't know that a lot of our stakeholders really understood when we said, hey, we need to do some things really differently. And because we really hadn't been putting our data out in front of us. I know John's not going to use the big C word tonight, but I am, because we have not bounced back since COVID. And I know when I sit in the webinars with the state board people and we talk about the state data and how the state is in a positive incline following post-pandemic COVID. We are not seeing those same increases, but the reason we're not seeing those same increases is our district was impacted in a very different way than a lot of other school districts. Our kids were out for a whole year. A lot of districts around us were not. There were districts who didn't stay out for remote learning as long as we were. There were some districts whose their kids were back in school in a month, 2 months, maybe a quarter. We had students who were out and not back in school for a whole year or sitting behind a screen for a whole year. There were districts in the Chicago area who maybe were out of school for a few weeks, if that. So I think the pandemic and the shutdown really impacted districts in Illinois in a very different way. And our very restrictive guidelines that we had in place, yes, I think we managed to make it through the pandemic safely. I'm proud of the fact that we put so many safety measures in place for our students and our staff. But I do think it is taking us much longer to reach that recovery level and see some of those gains, because our kids were out way longer than a lot of other districts were. And we're seeing those impacts, not just academically. We're seeing those impacts socially. We're seeing those impacts emotionally, mental health-wise, behaviorally, all of those things. And so we're starting to see those, that return to pre-pandemic data, but we're not there yet. And so we're making some progress. And so I just wanted to kind of give that little summary before we got started. So any questions before we jump right into it? So there are a lot of charts. Stop us as we go, and there's a lot of information, so you don't have to wait to the end. If you ask us something on one of the slides that we're going to talk about in a future slide, we'll just kind of say, hey, wait, we'll talk about that in a later slide. Is that okay? Okay. All right. So as you know, the Illinois report card is released annually. Some of this information board members already know because you go through trainings. So a lot of this is also written for our parents who don't know as much about the school report card as you may know already as board members. So I apologize if it is seeming like I'm sharing information with you that you already know, but we do have a lot of families out there who may not know as much about the report card as you do. So, but the Illinois school report card is released annually, and it is published by the State Board of Education. The annual report shows a complete picture of our students and the performance of all school districts across the state. So there are 2 accountability bands. We look at information through the elementary and middle school lens, so grades 1 through 8. And we also look at data through the high school lens, grades 9 through 12. So there's some new measures. So since we have returned post-COVID, they've added some new things literally every year. So this year, some of the new metrics that you're going to see is, for the first time, the report card is sharing information about full-time support personnel. So there's data in there about school counselors, nurses, psychologists, social workers. Typically, the report card is only shared information about your teachers and administrators. So now we're seeing a little more information about support personnel. There's some pupil support personnel ratio information in there. There's a lot more information shared about post-secondary enrollment. So before now, most of the report card has really just focused on graduation rate and dropout rate. Now, the state is doing more around, just focusing more on following students after they graduate and where are they going. And they're also collecting information about students that are in private schools than they ever have before. And then they're also doing a little more disaggregation of chronic absenteeism data. So they're also looking at that data from the lens of a homeless student, youth in care, and military. Those are like military kids who kind of follow their parents. There's some adjusted cohort graduation data. So now, instead of just looking at graduation data from our students who graduate in 4 years, they are also including data now for students who it takes them a little bit longer to graduate. They might graduate in 5 years or 6 years. And there also is a new measure for our English learners. So for students that have been taking the access, if you were a former English learner, defined as students who were English learners and met the state reclassification on access through high school graduation, or never an English learner, defined as students who are not English learners or former English learners. So another new classification. And then there are some new designations in terms of the meta. This one, we don't have very many of these, so if you looked in there, most of these were redacted because we didn't have very many of these numbers that existed in our data, but they are starting to look at a percentage of students in grades K through 2 who are chronically absent, percentage of grade K through 2nd grade students enrolled in dual language courses, and percentage of grade students receiving an A, B, or C in English language arts. So I'm going to stop because Chris just came in and we just recognized the veterans. So can I stop and kind of give him? So this is Chris Moeller. And come on up, Chris. Yay. He's from the high school. And he is a math teacher and Air Force. He was one of the only veterans who indicated that he was going to come in person. So we'll give that to Paul. So yay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for your service, Chris.
I would have been here sooner, but I went all the way to the building.
Oh, you went to the old building.
And I was like, wait, what? No, not the one I raised.
Oh, the one. Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I'm glad you came. Thank you, Chris. Yay. Okay, and then there's some elementary, middle school meta indicators. A percentage of fifth graders receiving A, B, or C in math. Percentage of middle school students receiving an A or B and no D's or F. And percentages of middle school students who have experienced a suspension or expulsion. So these are all new metrics that the state is collecting. All right, so we're going to jump into all the graphs. So John and I are going to tag team a lot of these, and John is going to start us off.
Yep. So we'll be going through kind of some things, looking at academic proficiency and growth, and then looking at kind of some other different metrics. So starting out with proficiency, and I wanted to kind of give a little bit of like, as you're looking at all of these, you can kind of think of if like all the kids in the state are driving along the interstate at the same time with the goal of getting to like 12th grade graduation, the proficiency kind of shows how far down the road they are. So this is disaggregated by our race data for the district. And as you can see here, the district as a whole, we had some very slight gains from 23 to 24, which is good. But we still have some groups that we need to focus a little more on for Hispanic 2 or more and Black students. The biggest, I think it'll be on this next slide, the biggest percentage growth for ELA proficiency was with our English learner students, which makes sense because they kind of are the ones who are focusing in the dual language program and other programs on picking up a lot more English as they're also working on their Spanish studies. But you'll also notice here this is some of our redacted data that Dr. Ivory Tatum was referencing, where we don't have data for ELA proficiency for students with IEPs this year that we're still working on.
So I think the key takeaway here is, yes, there's still some equity gaps, but the majority of our students are trending upward. So we are seeing a slight increase in our ELA proficiency, which is positive. Right. Oh, yep.
So this is the same data for math. This is proficiency in math, again disaggregated by race for this slide. So the district as a whole, again, slight gains in math, but some larger gains for African American students and Hispanic students, while we had a little bit of loss for the 2 or more for math. So. And then on the next slide, this is, again, sorry.
You said to interrupt.
Yeah,
So,
go.
okay.
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so was this graph telling us that 33% of our students made a little bit of progress?
That is a great question. And so this, the way the percentages are calculated here, we did that to be consistent with how ISB was calculating their percentages. So it looks like, 30%, 33% of growth for African American students looks great when you look at the percentages. The percentages for proficiency are relatively low to start with. So it looks like, if it was 33%, it should be way up for the second graph. The way they calculated it was not like the addition of percentages. So if you think of it, instead of thinking about it like percentages, if you think about it like something else like sheep, if we started out and we had, they look like they're at about 7 sheep here, and then you added, or if you had 6 sheep and you added 3 more sheep, then you have how many more sheep? 3, but the percent more sheep you have is 33% more sheep. So going from 6 to 9 for the growth, for the proficiency for African American students here, even though it's percentages, you're still looking at the
33.
growth of the change of the percentages.
Okay,
So
that
that's
answers.
where you get the 33%.
Yeah. Okay, so it was 33% growth, not 33% of our students grew.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, okay. And you're
Uh,
right, 6 to 9 is,
Yeah, and as we go through some of the other graphs,
Right.
just keep that in mind, that
Okay.
that's the percentage change of the percentage of proficiency or
Okay,
the
great.
percentage of growth.
thank you.
So, and as you look at the kind of the change from year to year of proficiency, you can also think about that kind of on the same interstate where we're looking at, we're all going down the same interstate. The change is kind of how fast you're going. So, or it's calculus, that would be like the second differential of like how far you are along. So, this is the same graph once again for our programs, as they call it at the state. And once again, the IEP data was redacted for this one.
So before we leave this one, I think one of our key takeaways is this was year one of our, last year was year one of our K-12 alignment for our new math curriculum. And we are encouraged that we are seeing some math growth after adopting our first year of illustrative math. So we're just really looking forward to seeing what additional gains are our students going to be able to make after year 2, year 3, and on. And the fact that we now have math that is aligned standards-wise from K through 12. And we'll talk about that a little bit more when we talk about ninth graders on track for algebra and all of that. So,
Can I ask one more question?
Yeah.
The redacting of the data for the IEP kids, is that because we have, usually ISBE doesn't report that if you have fewer than a certain number of kids.
So
So do we have fewer IEP kids than we used to have?
So, I've been
Uh,
involved more with the redactions. You want to take it? Or
Yeah,
want
no,
me
you
to?
can go ahead.
Okay, so what has happened just in the last 2 weeks since they released the report card is every time I go in, there are more redactions. So what they're doing is they're redacting any subgroup or any data point where the numerator or denominator is less than 10 students. And that could be if it is a group of students who exceeded, if it was a group of students who were proficient, it doesn't matter. So they're redacting. If you go in now and look at King, for instance, like all of King's ELA and math data has been redacted for the whole school because there are groups where there are less than 10 students who are proficient in an area. So they've redacted like these whole really significant areas. So I've sent several emails to some of the data folks at ISB saying, you know, it would be great if we could find a better way to kind of indicate some of the redactions. I understand student privacy. I get that if we have 9 students here, we don't want people trying to figure out who those 9 kids are, of course, but to be redacting all of the ELA data for a whole school because there are 9 students who might possibly be identified from one subgroup just seems to me to be a little over the top. But that is what is happening. And so for anybody who is now going through the report card and might be seeing a lot of redactions, that is what has happened in the last week or so. We've seen quite a few.
And what also appears to be happening, which is part of the problem, is that if you get far enough into any down into the data, so if you have African American students at King, first grade, who are like performing as like meets and exceeds, like at some point you're going to get to a number that's less than 10. And I think in the past they would have just redacted that, and now they're kind of redacting back up the
Yes.
chain, and that's where you see we have hundreds of students with IEPs in the district, but they're redacting all of that because they're somewhere down there, and that's what I think we're still working with
Yes.
the state rectify.
Yes. So, for example, at King, last year there were 130 black students. So instead of redacting the whole subgroup of black students, why don't we go down lower in the data and just redact where you might have had the 9 or 10 black students who exceeded or met, instead of redacting the whole subgroup of black students, which is, just seems a little, yeah, so, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right.
I don't know where you left off. Go ahead, John.
I think you're on.
Okay. Oh, so student growth. So what is SGP? So we talked a little bit about proficiency, and now we're going to switch, and we're going to give you some examples of what is student growth, the student growth percentile. So SGP describes how much a student grew compared to their academic peers who started at the same level. An academic peer is a student in the same grade and the same subject with the same test score in the previous year. So here's a good example, a good visual on the next slide, John. I think we showed you this same picture last year, I think. Several of the webinars that I've sat in with ISB this year, they've shown this same graphic. It is a really good graphic to show. I found this explanation here off to the side, and if you're a parent and you've had to take your kid to the pediatrician at any point in their growth as a kid, this example off to the side probably makes a little more sense to you too. So the student growth percentile represents a percentile, not a percent. It tells you how a student's growth on average compares to other students' growth. It does not tell you how much they grew, only whether their growth was above or below the state average, which is always the 50th percentile. It's kind of like when you go to the pediatrician and you're told your child is in the 75th percentile for height, which means they are taller than 75% of the kids that are the same age as your child might be. So this graphic is kind of showing that, right? It shows the same score from last year, and you kind of see your child and where their different growth is this year relative to their gains over time. So we can go to the next one. All the data that we're going to show you here in these next couple slides are percentile data, not percents. So think of it as student growth, not proficiency data. So I just want to give you that little caveat to start.
Yep. And so for all of the SGP, it is kind of into, they do it by cohort, and the cohort looks at each group of students from year to year and how they're performing against the rest of the students in the state who kind of match up with them. So fifth graders. So for the state, every year the cohort data is all normed at 50%. So the state every year will be at 50% for cohort data. So this is our data for the last 7 years. And as you can see for ELA, we had that kind of dip in 2020, and then we've been kind of working to come back from that in the last 4 years. Also of note here, since this is growth data, this is the same as the kind of like how fast you're going on the interstate. To start with, just kind of calculated in a different way, normed to all the state data for every single year. So below 50% means we're driving a little bit slower than everybody in the state for ELA across here. And so the baseline, the difference between the cohort and the baseline is always normed to the state cohort from 2019. So these are our ELA growth for the last 3 years based off of 2019. So what you can see between the two of these slides, where this one is remains kind of a little flat over here because the rest of the state was also increasing over those 3 years. Our data here, which is more of an absolute value based on the 2019 data, is increasing. So we are making progress on catching up on growth for ELA, but the state is also making progress at that same rate following 2019. So that's kind of comparing us to the rest of the state. This is broken down, that same data broken down by race. This is the cohort data, so you'll see it's normed at 50% for the state. And this is where those race and ethnicity groups break down for the district versus the rest of the state. Now, one other thing on this slide that you'll see on the right-hand side, this is the change in growth that we've had from the previous year. So if you look here for the cohort data, we had a slight decline in growth. As in this slide, you'll see that correlates with the slight decline in growth up here. So the change in growth, you can kind of think about on our same interstate example. This is how fast you're accelerating and decelerating. So if we're going a little slower as a district, we'd like to be accelerating to catch up on growth with everybody else. This is also the second derivative with respect to time. So if you're watching at home for all the kids taking calculus and they say, when will you ever use this in life? This is a great example of when you'll use it in life. So the growth of the growth is the acceleration. And you can see there are some bright spots for ELA and some areas where we need to kind of push on the accelerator a little bit more on that left-hand side.
And it kind of aligns with what we saw with our proficiency, right, for our Hispanic and our English learners who saw some increases for their ELA proficiency because, you know, of course they're coming and they're learning English and they're seeing some bigger gains, especially for our newcomers who are coming in and learning a new language and seeing some of those gains.
And as you mentioned, you can really see that here. So the English learners had more of the growth compared to students with IEPs and low-income students. So just as that was all the growth percentile data for ELA, this is the same data for math. So it's a little better picture for math. You can see pre-2020 and post-2020 is a little more even on our growth data for math. So we've been doing a little better job at getting back up to where we were before 2020 for that growth. And we've also had, for the last 3 years as the district, we've kind of been on the upward trend. We're still not at that 50th percentile mark where we'd like to be compared to state growth, but we're at least trending up for that data. And then again, this is based on the 2019 cohort data. So this is more of a absolute growth year on year. So again, a little dip in 23, but moving back up from 23 to 24 for that data. So this again, disaggregated by race and ethnicity. And I will mention also that the state has been calculating race and ethnicity together for all of their metrics, as internally we had been separating out race and ethnicity as two separate things over the past few weeks to align better with our state data, and so people can better use the panorama systems that we have in place for kind of day-to-day student monitoring and providing additional resources for students. That now is aligned to the same way things look in the state report card. So we anticipate that being a benefit for administrators and counselors and interventionists moving forward. So on the right-hand side here, you can see this again is the change in the growth. So this is the growth of the growth, the acceleration. So as a district as a whole, from 23, we are kind of accelerating with more acceleration kind of at the bottom half of this graph and some slight deceleration at the top of the graph. So that's students with IEPs is how we classify SPED students. And I think that's the same language they had used at the state level. So. And again, this is the same just with the state comparisons in there for you for the individual programs. I think. You were gonna
Okay,
hit
and
this
then
one?
I am going to talk a little bit about graduation rate. So, as you can see, our graduation rate has improved, and we're really excited about that. And we are still trying to get back to where we were before 2021 is kind of an anomaly. We had to, the state kind of gave us some parameters to follow post-COVID. We were putting some stipulations in place for our students, some no failure, no Fs. Again, as we were helping students kind of bounce back from remote learning. So that 2020 and 2021 graduation rate is a little inflated because we were following some emergency action measures that the governor put in place following the pandemic. So that 88% is great, but it isn't I'd say, an actual real graduation rate of where we actually were for those 2 years. So if you look at 2019, that was kind of more of a realistic place of where we were in 2018, 2019. So the fact that we're now jumped up to 83% is a real celebration because we'd really been hovering around that 80, 81. So really jumping up to 83% is just fantastic. I know Mr. Guzman has really done a lot of work in putting some systems in place. Something new that we're doing this year, I know it isn't reflected in this data, is really bringing that AVID program. I know we've had presentations on AVID about bringing that system of really talking about our students as scholars, talking about relational capacity, bringing that college and career and life and trade focus conversation to our students. Something that Mr. Guzman put in place when he took over is something that he calls Freshman Academy or Academy 9, where he has a really intentional focus on our ninth graders. As you know, our ninth graders, they are part of that group of students who struggled a little bit through the middle school years, partially due to they were the kids who were doing some of that remote learning and missed some things as middle schoolers. And so we're trying to get them back on track with some more intentional programming. I know I've talked a lot about our Tier 1 initiatives at the elementary level and some of the things we're doing at the middle school, but we've also taken that model into the high school. So we have a Tier 1 teacher who is actually doing some pull-out and actually working very intentionally with some high school kids who are really, really not able to read very well and who are not great writers. And so we're finding different ways to leverage some high yield instructional strategies with some ninth graders who just aren't where they need to be for ninth grade students. And so that is a real focus for Mr. Guzman and his team, and we're really seeing some gains. One of the things as superintendent, when Mr. Guzman came in last year, is one of my focus areas was also our graduation rate. I'd seen more of our students dropping out, not so much in regard to them being here at adult ed, but for other programs in the community. So we'd seen students just dropping out and going into other areas in our community. But we really want our kids to graduate from Urbana High School. And so we are really trying other ways to engage them in the high school. And we're going to talk about some of the other ways we're engaging them, I think, in some of our other data here coming up. Yeah, question.
This wouldn't be reflected in this chart either, but we know that students, if they don't have enough credits to become seniors, they obviously are within that 17% that
Yep.
are not graduating. Do we know about how many students take 5 years or 6 years?
Oh, it's in the
Okay.
report card.
Okay.
When we get to the live section, it shows you
Okay,
that.
so that shows that,
Yes.
that we are graduating those students, they're just taking longer.
It just takes longer. So there is I don't know if you want to just show it now, John, since you had it there. So if you go to students, it's not in the house. It's on the left side.
You've got the mouse now.
Oh, I've got the mouse, sorry. Ah. So it is in this mouse is very, okay. Go to, nope.
Sorry, it said on hair trigger. Do you want me to
Yeah,
grab
I
it?
was gonna say,
Okay.
can I just have a regular mouse? What? Okay, I'm just trying to get to graduation rate. Oh,
So
there.
You're also on you're on a 300 millisecond time delay. So it's,
Okay, here we go. So there's the 4-year. And if you scroll down, you can see graduation rate 5 years. So this shows you 82. It's really small. And then the number of students that it takes for 6 years. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yep, not that many more, yeah. Yeah, and COVID was right in the middle of that for those students, yep. So the COVID was the 2020 grads. Mm-hmm. Okay. So, yeah, John will take us back. All right, so ninth graders on track, I think, goes right into the same conversation. So I know we've seen a slight decrease for the ninth graders on track. John, you'll have to explain the year-over-year change. You want to explain that part first?
yeah, and again, this is just kind of another way. We're trying to mirror some of the similar graphs that Isby was showing. But this, as you look across the years, every year, this is how much we kind of increased or decreased from the previous year. So again, you see like some of them, we went from 58 to 69. That's like 9.3 more percent, but that's an increase of 17% year on year.
So what does on track mean? So on track means that you've earned five credits and you have no more than one F in one of your courses. So again, 2020, we were not able to. There was rules in place, right? Like so. If you were a student and you had Fs and you were a senior or you were, a current grad, there were some rules in place because of the pandemic and we, being all shut down that we weren't able to give Fs for certain courses. So that 76 is a higher number than what we've had recently since then and even before 2020. So that is a little elevated. But our goal, of course, would be to definitely get back into the 70s and above so we can be a little more on par with the state. So what we are seeing is since that time is what we've seen is something called more reclassified freshmen. So a reclassified freshman is someone who is a freshman and you don't have enough classes to be considered a sophomore, so you didn't pass enough classes. So we've had more of those students since 2020, and we want that number to go down, for one. And two, we just want to have students more on track in terms of passing more of their classes and receiving just less Fs. And so I think some of the classes and some of the programming that is being put in place at the high school in terms of some interventions and some of the extra supports for the freshmen intentionally will be helping this improve over time.
This is a measure, I'm guessing that you're tracking like all year long, right? So so what can be done like during the year to identify the students who are behind track and bring them on track?
Yeah. So what right now what it's called is Academy 9 is what they call it, Freshman Academy 9. So they get an extra, I think they get an extra study support. They get some time with we have a teacher who, it's actually Dr. Heinhorst, is at the high school, and so she's been, she works with some of the students individually. She does some pull-out. She does some real significant tier 1 kind of work with some of those kids. We have their literacy data and their math data. And Mr. Kennedy, I know, is doing some work with some of the students that are, Mr. Kennedy was one of our amazing math teachers. Right now, he's one of our tier 1 teachers. And so he works with some of the students who are struggling with Algebra 1 and some of the math classes. And we're providing some of those same supports for the students that are in Comp 9. So I think they're identifying the students who are in those classes and are failing or not doing well while they're in the classes, and then providing some of those additional supports. We've always had the after-school options. I know we don't have the 21st Century program, but we've continued to find some funding to be able to provide that ongoing tutoring after school. It's been hard, as you know, for high schoolers because of some of them work. It's just hard to get high school kids to stay after school for tutoring. So, again, that's a goal, is how can we incentivize them to stay after to get the extra help. But I think Mr. Guzman's goal is to get them that support during the day and not focus on having them stay after school to get some of those additional things. Chastity's in the audience. I know you work with can you think of anything that I'm not thinking of in terms of with their school improvement plan? Or you can come up here if I'm not thinking of it right now that they might be doing during the day. You come up into the mic. Sorry. Chastity is our Director of Equity and School Improvement, so she meets with all the school improvement teams pretty regularly.
Good evening. Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, that's better. One of the things I know, they're really pushing strong tier 1 instruction. So I would even say beyond identifying who the kids are and getting them individual support from like Dr. Heinhorst, they are also providing like intensive PD from their SIT team. And one shout out that I will say is their SIT team is really shared leadership. And so there are department leads who are really pushing some specific math focused work, like standards of mathematical practices. And so it's really trying to get everyone to see that we're all literacy and math teachers in some type of way, and how do we band together to push kids to do those critical problem solving skills, collaboration, and advocacy as well. And some of their student voice committees and groups too also are trying to push more engagement in the classrooms too. And so some of this is students are just disengaged. They could be in the classroom, but just not engaged in the content. And so I think the district's focus on that as well is being brought alive as well at UHS.
And one thing I would say is the high school has a really strong model for professional learning community. We call them PLCs. And so she mentioned the departments. So they really do, as departments, look at their courses, look at the students that are struggling within the departments, and how can they get additional help. So it's a little different from elementary in terms of that multi-tiered system of support where, they're wrapping around the elementary kids in a different way. But at the high school, it is a little different in terms of, how do you get that individual support to a 15 or a 16-year-old when they maybe aren't wanting it, right? Or they are not showing up to, okay, hey, here, I'm going to work with you fifth hour, and then they don't show up for that extra, time for that extra support. So it is a little different when, you're a 16-year-old and you can make that choice to say, no, I'm going to go to lunch and not show up for that extra help that I could be getting during that time period. So I think it is really, and I'm going to say this because I know this is Mr. Guzman's thing. He talks a lot about relational capacity. And so one of his big pushes this year is relationships, and talking with the staff about one of the keys is the, student engagement and getting the students to have relationships and wanting to be in class and wanting to be in the spaces to get the extra help. And so I think that is a biggie for our kids who are kind of disengaged, who have kind of tuned out and aren't really as focused on the learning part of it. So I don't know, Lolly, what do you think? You have anything you want to add?
I did have a question. What
Yeah.
does tier 1 mean?
Core. So tier 1 is like that level of support that everyone is supposed to get. So it's like that core instruction. Yeah.
I don't know. I know that when I was a freshman, the academy, they only had it, I think, first semester, and that was, they kind of tried to implement it, and then it didn't really work out. And I know that, at least for me, that, and what I've heard from like this year and past years is that like the teachers like don't really care, I guess, or they're just doing whatever, and a lot of students are just frustrated because it just takes away from lunchtime, because maybe not like all the students need the extra help. So yeah.
Okay.
I don't know. I think it's like some teachers go above and beyond, and some don't. So it's just like on a case by case basis. So it's hard to say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a good point. Okay. Okay. You could just stay there, Miss Beckless. Okay. All right. So I think this is me too. So 8th grade passing algebra 1. So again, if we look, we included an extra year of data here, just kind of wanting to give you an extra data point. So if you look beyond 2019, which is where we've been kind of giving you data beforehand, and look at 2018, you'll see we were kind of doing some really good things. And I think we made some changes in our programming. We brought in some acceleration. I think 2018 was maybe when we were doing iMath at the middle school. And we kind of said, hey, this is iMath is this kind of program where we really it wasn't very equitable, right? Like we weren't really bringing in enough kids of color. We really needed to kind of do some things differently. And so we started really looking at how can we cast a wider net and get more kids involved in making sure that they were having an opportunity to take algebra at the middle school level. So 8th graders passing algebra is, these are 8th graders who are taking Algebra 1 before they get to the high school, just for people who are wondering what that means. So then 2020 came, of course, and that number started to go down, and now we are trying to get that number back up again. And as you can see, the state kind of stayed a little state level, and our number decreased. And again, I'm going to say, partially, I strongly believe our middle schoolers were home for a whole year, and now we're kind of bringing them back up again to where we like to see them be. So we've seen some increases post-pandemic. We still have work to do, but again, I think having a consistent program in terms of curriculum is going to help that. We didn't really have a Algebra 1 program that was aligned. Our math folks at the middle school kind of had their own Algebra 1 program. The high school had their own Algebra 1 program. And all of our math program wasn't aligning with one another. What we were teaching in K-5, the core program that we were using wasn't really aligning with what our middle schooler teachers were teaching in 6th, 7th, and 8th, and then what our students then went to the high school and received in terms of math. It was kind of like having 3 separate math programs in one district. And so having an alignment of curriculum, using the same vocabulary language, using the same math techniques and math procedural things is going to make a huge difference in terms of having that K-12 alignment. And so hopefully now we'll start seeing that number go up a little bit too. So, John, I didn't know if were you adding anything to this one?
No, I
Nope.
was just
Okay.
highlighting what you were saying about
Okay.
the.
Next is chronic absenteeism. And so John's going to start off and talk a little bit about the year-over-year change.
Yeah, and once again, the same, and it's very apparent here. This is how we've been working on chronic absenteeism year over year. So some of those you can see we had really great increases, like almost a 88% increase from 21 to 22. So chronic absenteeism, again, as we're looking at a lot of these graphs, so passing algebra, this is kind of, think about like a basketball score, higher is better, 9th grade on track, higher is better. Some of these are lower is better, so this is a golf score, so lower is better on this one. So we're looking for the last couple years, we've been kind of trending down as we've been focusing more on that chronic absenteeism to make sure kids are in school. I'm really looking forward to see what our data is going to look like for next year, for this current school year, when report card comes out next year, as we've been making a major push for being in school and present in attendance.
So chronic absenteeism, the definition is there. It's students who miss 10% or more of school days. One thing that people ask a lot is, does it include excused and unexcused absences? And it's both. So I think that is one big factor in this. So it doesn't matter if you are sick and your mom calls you in for 2 or 3 days. Those excused absences also count for chronic absenteeism. They don't, it may be different for chronic truancy, but for chronic absenteeism, excused and unexcused are both part of it. And again, I know we've said this when we talked about this when Chastity was here and presented our district data and the school data. It is a not just a district focus, it is every district in the state of Illinois is focusing on chronic absenteeism because we're all struggling with it. The state's struggling with it. It's a national issue. We thought we'd show some, in some of our future slides too, we're going to share some kind of comparing ourselves to some of our colleagues and some of our districts in our ROE 9, but this is some data that we also thought would be relative, that we're seeing that in our just our districts that are close to us and across the state. So the state is seeing 26%, which is great, but we're also seeing right here regionally that our districts very close to us are also seeing that same struggle. So that is why it is been a huge focus for us this year. I know we've had some parents that have reached out to us who have said, you know, they appreciate that we are focusing on attendance matters and that we're really pushing this. And again, I'm going to say this publicly. We don't want kids that are sick coming to school. We understand if you're sick, we still want you to stay home, 100%. However, we also want to make sure that if you're home and you're sick, you're going to the doctor. All of those things are important. So we're not trying to send the message to families that we want perfect attendance and we want sick kids coming to school. We just want to make sure that if you're able to be at school, you're at school. And so I think there has been this shift. You'll see it again, and I know I keep harping on it, but 2020, 2021, you know, we had those numbers and then we shot up to, this is like John said, higher is not good in this instance. So we want to have the lower numbers here. So, Paul, it looks like you were going to say something. So, okay. CTE is a growing area for us, which is a positive. So that is our career and technical education. We're seeing some higher participation in the CTE program. We're seeing higher numbers of our students that are taking more credits in the CTE area, which is great. So that one is a nice positive to see. On the next slide, we also have some increases. I think the one that is a really good one to see is dual credit. And I know we have established some great relationships with Parkland, and we are happy to see more of our students taking advantage of that and participating in more dual credit options. Again, we are always happy to see more of our students participating in that advanced placement. We want more of our students of color participating in advanced placement. We didn't share that in terms of a breakdown in race for this slide, but we can show you that if you wanted to see that. But we are happy to see that number is also going up, as well as our students that are in the honors. And now we're going to kind of shift to talking about the designations. So did anybody have any questions about any of the other data slides before we shift to talking about the designations? Okay. So the annual summative designations are multiple measures of indicators of academic achievement and student success. As we've talked about the designations before, it is an annual designation based on prior year performance. The schools are identified and placed on a school improvement status by the state. It includes schools with student groups needing support and otherwise reasonably performing schools. A school in, you can go to the next one, John. A school in school improvement status remains in status for 4 years, regardless of changes to its annual summative designation during those years, in order to encourage sustainability of progress. So kind of once you're designated for those 4 years. Yeah, and we'll show you that chart here in just a second. So what are the indicators and weights? So earlier on, we kind of talked about the state's accountability measures are broken down into 2 bands. So the first is the elementary middle band, and then the second band is the high school band. And then there are 5 I can show you here. So the different colors, the light blues, the yellows, the dark blues, show you the weights of how much each area counts for toward your designation. So earlier we talked about math proficiency, ELA proficiency, math growth. So if you look at the pie chart, you'll see, like if you look at the elementary bands, math proficiency and ELA proficiency is worth 7.5% toward the designation. Chronic absenteeism, on the other hand, is a much bigger piece of the pie and is worth 20%. So to me, yes, proficiency in math and ELA is really, really important to the state, and it's important to us. However, if students aren't in school and they're not there for us to teach them, and their students aren't there to learn, then it doesn't mean anything, right? So that is why the state has kind of upped its weighting of saying that chronic absenteeism needs more of a weight because the kids have to be there for us to teach them and for them to learn, right? So that's why that 20% is there. And then the growth measure, the ELA growth and math growth, we talked a lot about SGP. That measure has gotten higher over the last few years because talking about proficiency, I think, is a little harder for people to understand. But what we really want to focus on is not so much attainment and achievement. We really want to be able to see growth over time. And so I'm glad that the state has shifted to really giving more weight to this, to seeing how our students are growing over time, not just how proficient they are at this particular moment. And then the same thing for the high school. You can kind of see the same breakdown. I think for the high school kids, the 10% absenteeism is a little different, right? When you're a high school kid, there are other things impacting you being at high school, working, if you're doing internships, if you have other, as you're older, that absenteeism number changes a little bit. The 9th grade on track is really important if our students aren't completing their classes, if they're, getting multiple Fs. So they put a little more weight on that. The climate survey, I do want to say this year, all of our, that has been an area where some of our schools have struggled in the past. We have had schools who haven't gotten all of their percentage points in the climate survey, which we have really said that is not okay, right? Like, you need to be getting full percentage points for climate survey. That's just basically sending out the survey, encouraging all of your parents and students to fill it out. And so this year we got 100%, every single school got all of their points for their climate survey. So that was really great to see. And what else to highlight? I think those are the major ones. The science we've had for a couple years. If you remember last year, the EL proficiency one was the new one. That was the English language learners that were new and their proficiency rate. So that was a new one for last year. The English learner progress to proficiency is that ELPTP. So that was a new measure added last year. So then the different designations, you've seen these, but our folks that are watching in, the exemplary is overall performance in the top 10% of the schools. Commendable, and then targeted, comprehensive, and intensive. The subgroups are listed there under targeted support. So what the state, and you saw this in our slides, so what the state does is they kind of designate student groups demographically, which John talked about this earlier, by race and ethnicity together. And then they also have a targeted group that they call a program group. And that is basically our low-income students, our English learners, former English learners, which is new this year, and then students with disabilities. And then here are our designations. Again, our racial subgroups are kind of off to the side, and our program subgroups are off to the side. And so what I did is kind of listed the 22-23 designation in the first column, so you can see what the designation was last year and then what the designation was for this year. So we want to shout out the high school, who remained commendable, so that was great. The high school dropout rate and the graduation rate play a huge part in the formula for the high school. So that bump from going from 80% to 83% was a big deal for UHS. And so it may not sound like a lot, 3%, but it really is 3% is a big growth. And so that was really exciting to see them stay commendable. And the middle school stayed comprehensive, and they've been comprehensive, I want to say, for 2 years already, maybe longer, because I think they were, yes, 3 for them. Yep. And they are designated for all students. So when you look on the side there, it would be all of those groups. Dr. Preston Williams Jr., they were intensive last year and they remained intensive for all students. Leo was targeted last year and they remained targeted. So last year they were targeted, they received their initial designation for English learners and low income. But this year their designated subgroup that they struggled with were, as you saw on the report card, were Black students and students with disabilities. And then Martin Luther King Jr., they were targeted last year, but this year they are comprehensive. And because that is a change in their designation, this is going to be a planning year for them. And they are designated for all students, as you'll see on the side there. And they will then be working with Chastity, and we have a State Board of Education person who we work with. How often do you guys meet, monthly, or is it more than monthly?
Either 1 to 2 times a month.
Yeah, yeah.
With ISB.
Yeah, with
but
the State Board person.
with me, several other times, and with their sit teams, of course, as well.
Yes. And then Thomas Paine, they were targeted last year, and their new designation is comprehensive. So this will be a planning year for them also coming up. And they were newly designated for all subgroups. And so they too will then have an ISB person that they will meet with regularly with Chastity. Mrs. Smith, our Director of Professional Development, is also very involved with the school improvement process related to the designation, so she usually is involved as well. I did add the footnote at the bottom in regard to Yankee Ridge Multilingual School. Due to the reorganization and redistricting of the Spanish and French dual language program, if you were in the report card, you saw that Yankee Ridge doesn't have a designation because they basically are starting off as a basically all new school because they have all new staff and basically all new students. Questions? Yep.
Yankee Ridge,
Mhm.
weren't we supposed to get some money through school improvement for Yankee Ridge because of its designation?
So we
And so
got
what happened to the money?
So we got money last year for
Mm-hmm.
them. They didn't get money this year because they don't have a new designation. So the money that they got last year was used. We used it up through August for their previous designation. So last year they were designated for Black, and I'll have to go back and look. I might have it with me, Black IP students, but it was used in the summertime for planning, PD, and they worked with, I want to say, a consultant from the University of Illinois Circle campus came and worked with some teachers from the middle school and Yankee Ridge, and they did some pretty intensive planning and summer work, some summer PD work. So the money was used. This year they don't get any money because they were not designated this year.
Okay, and we didn't count on any money.
We didn't
in our
count on
budget
any money.
Because we knew they were, okay.
Yeah, we knew that the state was giving them a new RCDTS code, yes. Yep. But we have other funding that we can, like we have Title I money. We also, if it's supplemental support work, we have Title III money that Lupe can utilize to support them through some supplemental resources and things like that.
And while they had almost all new students at Yankee Ridge, with the redistricting, all of the schools had a proportion of new students, some of them more, I think,
Than
DPW
others.
and Leal, you mentioned. But
So all the schools are kind of treating this as like a baseline year for them, right? Like Leo in particular. So, many of the students that they were designated for, when they received their targeted designation, a lot of those students are at Yankee Ridge right now. And so now with their new designated group, they now are going to focus their school improvement planning work on their Black students and students with disabilities, since that is a group that from last year showed up in their new designation as a group of students who they can now focus their efforts on. And they have new students at their building right now. They're black. I don't know the proportion of black students that they have right now, but there are quite a few black students there who need support. And so that is a way that Chastity is there supporting them through the school improvement process, to be able to use the funds that they're going to get this year to really focus on those designated groups there.
I would also add that
Yep.
before the designations came out, because of some of the new assessments like M-Class and us really getting higher participation rates in MAP, like Leo already knew this a month ago and had created an instructional plan with their school improvement team to support black students and students with disabilities. So that's the great thing too about some of the assessments that have been rolled out this year. Like, we can catch and be proactive about identifying groups or grade levels or particular bands of student who need the support. And so I would say that Leo is already on track to supporting specifically 2nd through 4th graders too, that they had identified using M-Class and MAP data and kind of triangulating, well, here are groups that we really need to support.
John, can you go to the schoolhouse?
Yep.
Okay,
Do you
so
want, so if you either use that screen, that'll be lagless, or I can help drive if you'd prefer. It's going to have a little lag if you're looking at the
well,
screen.
why don't you just, because this
Okay.
mouse, I think, is really hypersensitive. So I wanted to actually show you, and I don't need to go through every schoolhouse. Maybe I'll just show you one. Maybe we'll just do Leo, since we were talking about Leo. Is that okay? Because I do think the schoolhouse is pretty cool. And then if you have time, we can, you can go and just kind of play around in the schoolhouse and just choose a school to go to. So you want to go to Leo, maybe? Is
Yep.
this Leo?
Yep.
Okay, so if you look at the colors correspond to the different areas. And so at the top of every schoolhouse, you'll see the designation. So Leo's designation was targeted. But what is really nice, what you can do is if you go in and choose one of the areas, you can actually see a growth area. So let's do ELA. I was going to say do one of the growth areas. Okay.
Okay, here, hold.
So that's okay. We can stay here. So this was ELA proficiency. So all students. Okay, so this is 2024, all students. And the area that they needed to meet was 40%, right, Chastity? Yes.
Yes, the cutoff score was 40, so
40%.
that's across the board when you look at the middle school and elementary band. So if you look at any of the schoolhouses and you see that number above their designation, that's where they were. I will say that last year, I believe it was like 30.
Yeah, so if you go to
7.
2023, so that's what I was going to try to show you, is so you can see the comparison. So if you go, then you can see the you can see the change from one year to the next. So at 2023, they were at 88, and 2024 looks like they went down a little bit in the all-student group. But the group that I really wanted to highlight is, why don't you go to the growth, John? Maybe to one of the ELL growth or math one, either one. So, and if you, so here is 2024, all students. If you maybe show, like, why weren't they designated this year for Hispanics? So if you show the Hispanic students, or EL, either one, you can see, so 2024, they met the criteria for the designation. So the 52. And then for last year, you'll be able to see how much growth they made. So the Hispanic students last year were at 37, which was below. But this year, they were at higher than that and in the 50s. So you can kind of see how much growth they made, which is nice. And math was, I think, an even higher one to show. So this year for math, they're above that 40, so there's the 48. But then if you look at 2023,
We'll change the
oh, yeah,
All
that's
from
all
all,
students. Yep. It always goes back to all students. So 2024.
That's black.
Oh, that's black.
Ah, sorry.
So you can see why they were designated for black, because the black students were down there at 21%. At the 21st percentile, sorry.
So
So they're-
25 to 54
Yeah.
for Hispanic students.
So that's a lot of growth for math, so, which is great. So that is why you can see they didn't have a designation this year for their English learners and their Hispanic students. But you did see, if you toggle around in there, you can see why some of those designations exist and why for certain groups. One thing that I did is I went in and played around, just because we were talking about some of the math increases and looking at some of those other charts that we showed you. But if you go into all the schools, one celebration that I was really happy to see was that we saw math growth for almost every single school. That I really want to say is, I just want to attribute that to having our K-12 aligned illustrative math curriculum this year. I really do think that we can attribute it to having core curriculum and what a difference core curriculum is going to make in terms of our ELA growth as well in the future, because we're already seeing it in math. So if you want to go around here and play in the little houses and click around and see some of the math data, you'll see for almost every school there is some math growth that you can see from 2024. If you go in that corner and then you click in 2023, you'll see the differences. So even for Dr. Williams, see that like last year, that is one of the reasons why they were intensive, right? That four percentile. But then if you look at 2024, you want to click on 2024, John, that's a lot of growth in 1 year. So from the 4th percentile to almost the 30th percentile, that's a lot of growth in 1 year. So that's something to celebrate. While it might be below the 40th, it's still a lot of growth in 1 year. So, I'll keep going here. So I'm going to throw it to Angie, and we're going to talk about a couple of other data points that are not about student data that is also in the report card. So some teacher vacancy data.
Hello. So the data on teacher vacancies is not in the Illinois school report card, as Dr. Ivory
Sorry.
Tatum stated. Yep.
It's not, but we always include it every year
Yes.
because you guys always ask us for it.
Yes. And it's relevant. Yes.
It's relevant, and we put it in here because we're asked about it every year. So even though it's not a report card, we continue to provide it to you because you ask us for it. So.
Absolutely. And it's very important. So some highlights from the report card that definitely makes sense is that this year, in 2024, the gray is our secondary teachers, that we have had fewer hires there and more hires in elementary. I think that something to note is when you have, stable leadership, especially at the high school, we've seen some gains from the past year that teacher retention is going to stay. We hired more teachers at the elementary level than the secondary level, and then that flip-flopped this year from the year before. In terms of long-term subs, we've had a decrease in hiring our long-term subs, which is a good thing. We want to retain our long-term subs, and we want to get them certified and help get them certified. But the fewer long-term subs that we have is better because we're hiring more licensed staff for our students. And so this is just where we are at in terms of how many people we have hired so far. And this, can change daily. We were at a recruitment fair today at ISU. So those are our numbers. Do you have any questions about those vacancies? I do think that our teacher vacancy grant funds have helped recruit and retain staff just based on the different incentives we're able to offer our new hires and loyalty bonuses to come for our our loyal staff members. If you'll click to the next one. All right, so teacher retention comparison, we're going back to the report card. And so earlier, or I don't know if I said this at a board meeting or not, but I'll get to that in a minute. So we are pretty close to other districts in terms of teacher retention. So the numbers that you're seeing are from the 22-23 school year to the 23-24 school year. So at the end of last school year, we had retained 83% of the teachers from the 22-23 entering into the 23-24. Our Skyward data, which I think I've sent to you, that I've talked about it either at a meeting or I emailed it to you. So from 23-24 to 24-25, so this school year, based on our Skyward reports, we've retained 87% from 23-24 to this year, which we're really pleased about. Our goal for 24-25 to the next school year is retaining 87% of our teachers. And so we have we have 87 is retaining 90%. That's our goal for the next school year. So we're hoping to raise another 3%, which won't be reflected in the report card for another year after that. So this is kind of a back and forth. But I feel good about the numbers compared to our surrounding districts, that we're on par with them. Any questions about teacher retention? Okay.
Oh, I had a question.
Yes, please.
Does that include like people who staff who retired?
So that's a good question. That does go against like our count because they're no longer a teacher in our district, but every district's going to have that as well. So, I mean, if we have several teachers that retire in a certain year, that it could be kind of an off year. I didn't run those numbers to see how that impacted, but every other district has the same thing. So it's just that when teachers are returning back to the district. So we retained from 22-23 to 23-24, we retained 83% of teachers. From 23-24 to this school year, which is not on the report card now, that will be on the report card next year, by our calculations from Skyward, we've retained 87% from last year to this year. So this is old data now, but that's just what's reported on the report, or recorded on the report card. Yeah? Our numbers have stayed we increased from last year to this year from the year prior. So with the changes, I didn't see a difference. If anything, we improved. I know that it was a really hard change for a lot of people, but as I stated before, when Wiley closed, we didn't lose very many staff members. All of the staff members that were at Yankee Ridge that were displaced got their first or second choice. And we retained a really high percentage. I don't have those numbers with me. I can get those numbers back to you. But again, change I think is a little bit harder for adults than kids. But I think people are adapting. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. So something else that was on the report card that we're investigating a little bit more is the percentage of teachers who have missed less than 10 days. So on this particular slide, we did some calling around to other districts because we noticed that our percentage was lower than others. And in this particular slide, that's not good to have a lower score. We want to have a higher score because it means that that our staff are at work. And so we called the other school districts, and different people report absences differently. And so meaning in our district, we take increments of half days and full days for our teachers and for our administrators. In some school districts, they do not take half days or full days. They do in hour increments. And so that has some impact. But we also are running data on attendance when the days that staff are missing for teachers, for example, when Champaign, we have a lot of teachers who live in Champaign and their kids go to Champaign schools. And so we're running comparisons to see if our teachers are missing work more on the days where Champaign is out and we're in, which would make sense. And that information will be provided to the calendar committee and trying to align our calendars the best way for next year so that it also improves our student attendance. I think this is also a great conversation topic for our roundtable in the spring or late winter to talk about ways to use teacher vacancy grant to incentivize staff attendance too, and to just kind of get to the root of the problem of what can we do so that staff want to be there. Okay.
Angie, what is the current numbers of days that teachers can take off, for personal days, sick days, vacation days, or whatever?
What days they can't take off or
Can, how many?
can? They
Yeah,
get 2 personal days.
Mm-hmm.
And
One
fif-
religious?
Yes,
Okay,
there
that's
is,
what I meant,
yes.
Yeah,
And then for sick days, it's 15 for teachers.
okay, per year.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay.
You have one more. Maybe we didn't put it in there. The admin, yeah, maybe not. Okay. Oh, okay. Class size. So, this is another data point that we talk about every time we kind of talk about our school report cards. So we've talked a lot about class size in the last year or two when we've been talking about the dual language school. So I don't know that I need to say a lot about this one, but it's been in our presentation for the last couple years, so I just included it. And as you can see, our class size numbers are looking pretty good in comparison to previous years. And I mean, I think those are really good numbers, and they've decreased a little bit, not significantly, but that's where we are.
I imagine our variance is also probably a lot better with as well, right? We'll have fewer, especially the dual language classrooms. We'll have fewer that are really small and
Oh, yeah.
right, and fewer that are overflowing.
The French dual language classes are still a little smaller because, you know, their numbers are not as great in terms of overall capacity for the program. So, you know, we have the same number of classes that we had last year, but just we don't have the same, you know, number of students. So their classes are a little smaller. But yeah, we still have some. We don't have those classes where we had like 12 and 13 across the board, across the whole district, but yeah.
But in particularly in the Spanish dual language and Lille English classes, the variance
Yes.
standard deviation is much lower.
Yeah.
In addition to having overall lower class sizes following the redistricting. I will also note, it says gen ed and dual language here. This is a little different from what's on the state report card because it also doesn't include our pull-out special ed and cross-cat programs.
We've talked about that. So they've had a couple of engagement opportunities. I know Madam Florence, they just had an opportunity, and I don't remember if it was with the church or if it was with the U of I, but they've been doing some things in the community to try to get the word out. And so, yeah, so I know I can't think of all of them right now, Sitlali, but I know they're trying to. Now that the school is established, and I think making sure that families saw that we didn't decrease the number of classes, the staffing remained the same. You know, I know those were some of the concerns. People were worried that the focus was going to be, you know, not as much focus on French, but we didn't change any of the supports that are there. The parent liaisons are still there, so hopefully families will see that and, you know, either come back to the program or now choose to, you know, we have some of those families that are in private schools that maybe will say, hey, we can come to a really high quality French dual language program and save a lot of money. So I don't know, but I do know that the teachers in the French dual language program and some of the leaders in the community are really trying to engage their families and their stakeholders to get them there. So, Paul, were you going to say something else about class size? I thought, okay.
Well, you see, I didn't know if we happen to know how many like class size adjustment TAs we have this year as compared to prior years. I know it's
I
kind
don't
of
think we have.
We don't have, we may have one.
One.
We started out the year with 0, and that's huge. We don't like to have the classroom adjustment size TAs because it's not consistent employment. We have to rip
Right,
them every year,
right.
right? And because of the unbalanced dual language programs between Leo and DPW, that was something that we utilized more. And this year, we started out with 0. We had to have one at Yankee Ridge do it to like one person over in kindergarten.
Wow, that's huge. That's the lowest I've ever had.
I know.
That's my time on the board.
Right.
Yeah.
It's really solved a lot of issues. For-
Yeah, I
That's
think
that's
that-
a win for
It's
redistricting.
huge.
Oh, yeah, there have been
Huge.
years when we've started at Dr. Williams and Leo with like 6. Because we had to start the year, or we didn't even riff them. Like for several years, we didn't even riff them because we
Yeah.
knew we were going to need them as soon
Right.
as school started. So, yeah, I think we had one, and we maybe posted for one, and then maybe didn't need it. But I think we've had.
That's
maybe one.
fantastic news.
Yep.
Okay, so this is just our admin ratio. It's also a part of the report card. And so in Urbana, we have 117 students per administrator, which seems to be similar to the districts in the ROE 9, except with the exception of Mahomet. And it's a little bit lower than the state average. So the state average is 136. Are there any questions about that? Okay.
Are there like statewide definitions for what positions count as admin? I know that's always a question.
It's so, yeah. There are there are job codes for administrators. Some districts count deans as administrators, some do not. This is another one like we saw with our teacher attendance, where there's so many variables on what districts count as administrators or not administrators. So it is hard to tell. Yeah.
It's hard to compare apples and apples here because
Uh-huh.
you don't know if your neighbors are counting apples
Correct.
or counting oranges.
Right. Everybody's reporting this differently.
So it's hard to know what this slide really means then.
Correct.
Yeah, so I was going to read it. It says the administrators work with, some administrators work with our directors or superintendents. Administrators are responsible for supervision and control of schools. Duties may include personnel management, student discipline, performance evaluation, professional development, oversight of facilities and finances, instructional leadership, and engagement with the community. So it sounds like they're talking about directors, superintendents, principals, assistant principals. It doesn't sound like coordinators and people like that. These are people who have supervisory duties and control of schools and are basically directing and leading buildings. The one thing that I think is different from one school to another is maybe those 12-month district service personnel kind of people. You know, those people who might be at facilities but this says oversight of facilities and
Yep.
finances are considered administrators. So
Yep.
that would be like people in Randy's position,
Mm-hmm.
people in Mary Ann's position. They're counting those people as administrators.
Yep.
And I think one thing maybe we'd found, correct me if I'm wrong, was like deans. Some people were
Mhm.
counting deans and some weren't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think deans would be counted because
Deans are not in our
deans are
count.
not considered in our
Mm-hmm.
yeah. And supervisory, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Always a question that comes out about the number of administrators in the district. Is that something that you evaluate each year as far as reconfiguring how you
Mm-hmm.
run different programs?
Absolutely.
Okay.
We have those conversations at the district level a lot to make sure that we're maximizing our people and not having too many people.
Okay, so we're almost to the end. Aren't you glad we just have this one presentation tonight? I'm trying to do a good job of managing your time. So key takeaways. So here's our recap. So just some key takeaways. I know you may have some you want to talk about as well. So our average proficiency is showing some slight increases in ELA, so we're happy about that. Almost all of our K-8 schools showed math growth. after adopting our first year of core math curriculum. So that is exciting to see. And I look forward to hopefully seeing some ELA growth and SLA growth next year when we also have a year behind us with our English and our Spanish language arts curriculum as well. UHS is focused on several school-wide initiatives that we talked about some of those, and they've been able to increase their graduation rate by 3%. Our chronic absenteeism has improved by 10% from 2023. And then some English language arts and math. Next slide, John. Next steps. Again, making sure that we're continuing our implementation of new English and Spanish arts curriculum. Chastity talked about this a little bit, the new interventions and curriculum alignment that we're doing with our data. You guys have seen Jessie Bradford has been here, and she's talked about some of the new database and instructional tools that we're using that align with the core curriculum that is being taught. And so we're really excited about that. Our teachers are able to use that M-class data and make real database decisions around individual student learning. So that's been, that is going to be game-changing for us at the elementary level for sure. The restructuring of literacy and intervention staff, that has been a huge impact, yes, but we're also seeing that core language arts curriculum and those folks being in those classrooms as co-teachers or curriculum implementation teachers, that they're being a direct impact on the implementation of our new core curriculum this year in a very positive way. We're really looking forward to year 2 of implementation of core math. I know this year we've been pushing reading, writing. We can't forget about math because we're seeing that we saw some growth, right? So we can't shift our focus so much on English language arts and Spanish language arts and forget about our math curriculum because we saw that it is working. More intensive professional development for our teachers. We had our first fall institute this year. We're intentionally putting professional development in the summer at the beginning of the year, trying to give our teachers as much PD as we can to start the year so they can use it when they need it the most. And then for lastly, for student supports, we have spent a lot of time at the beginning of the year talking about Panorama, and it's a tool that we've had for a couple years, but we really haven't been using it to its capacity. And we have spent a lot more time this year really going into Panorama and showing our administrators and our teachers and our student engagement advocates and all the people who are working directly with our students to create ways that we can intervene early, like Paul was saying with high school students. Like, what are we doing to make sure that when we know that they're struggling, how are we supporting them? So creating intervention support plans, attendance support plans, discipline support plans. And we can do all of that in Panorama, and we haven't been utilizing it. It's something that was fairly new in the last 2 years, but because we had so much new, like this influx of money that we got through ESSER, and all the funding that we've received since COVID we've got so much new, right? We had new map, we had a new benchmarking system. We had this new Panorama. We have new core curriculum. It's been new. So we've had so much new information and new things. We haven't really had the opportunity before now to really go deeply into some of these things. And now we're starting to do that. And Panorama is one of those things that we have just not really taken the time before this year to go down deep in. There are some great things that we can do with this tool. And it's something that we bought with our ESSER funds, and it is one of the best purchases that we have made because there is so much good stuff in here that we can use to intervene and create plans for our kids. And our teachers are starting to use it. Our administrators are using it, and so we also see this as being a real way that we're going to be able to successfully support our kids at all levels. Like we can use it. All the way up through high school, and it is very user friendly. So there's a chronic absenteeism dashboard. There is a discipline dashboard, like with the few clicks, we can go in and see everything we need to see for a kid. About an individual student, and anyone can do that, an administrator, a department chair, a student engagement advocate, a social worker. And so this is a tool that we are really, we have not been using it at its capacity, and we are definitely tapping into it way more than we have before. And so for 24-25, we're definitely focusing on being in classrooms more. So we meet with our UEA a lot and our UEA leadership, and one of the things that I heard loud and clear from our UEA leaders is that our administrators needed to be in classroom spaces more last year. And they said that, we needed to be in the spaces with our students. We needed to see some of the behavioral challenges that our teachers were dealing with. We needed to be in those spaces and know what culture and climate things were happening and how we could better support our teachers. And so we responded this summer, and we created a district-wide walkthrough tool. And so all of our administrators go into classrooms, and we walk into spaces. And this was a little, what's the word? Intimidating, maybe, or I don't know. What? Yeah, a little anxiety. That's a better word. At the beginning of the year, there was an expectation for our principals, our APs, our district leaders. We all go into. I even go into classrooms with my little iPad, and I walk into rooms, and we have a tool that we use, so it isn't subjective. We have very specific questions that we look for, things that we are looking for when we go in. And they're all really around curriculum implementation. So we're very specifically looking for things related to the curriculum. We are looking for things related to student engagement. That is one of our big focuses this year is behavior, student engagement, social emotional learning. We are really wanting to make sure that if we need to be supporting different areas for behavior management, that we're seeing those things. So then we go into classrooms, we have this tool, it kind of uploads the data. The principals get to see that data. Sometimes we walk around in classrooms with the principal. We shared the questions with the teachers, so they knew what we were looking for. Our principals are supposed to be sharing that data with the teachers as well. So it wasn't meant to be a gotcha. We shared the tool with the union and our in advance, so they knew what we were going to be looking for before we started the walkthroughs. So yeah, it is a very curriculum-focused tool, but it is definitely something that I think has been eye-opening for all of us. And I think our teachers are kind of used to it now. I mean, I think at the beginning it was a little like, whoa, why are all these people coming in and out of our classrooms? But they're kind of used to it now. And it has been really, it's been good for all of us to go in. We're seeing the curriculum being taught on the ground. And we're seeing a lot of the things that our teachers have been talking to us about the social emotional needs of our students. We're seeing some of the behavioral challenges, and we're seeing some rock star teachers. Like, I have gone in and I just walk in and plan to be in somebody's room for a couple of minutes, and then I end up sitting down and watching a whole lesson for like 30 minutes. And so we're getting to see some really amazing things happening. So Sherry was like, what is a walkthrough tool? So that's why she talked about it a little longer, because Sherry sent me an email and asked me what it was. So yeah. Questions?
Another question, and
Yeah.
I'm not sure, why isn't there a math proficiency rate?
Oh, you mean in the next steps?
No, because it said the ELA went from 8 to 12.4%, and math is just a statement. It wasn't a number of a proficiency number.
Oh, because it probably wasn't an increase. I don't know why you didn't put in math as a key takeaway. You mean on the key takeaway slide?
Yeah, and I mean, especially because
If you
page 36, I
yeah,
believe.
we probably should have.
I mean, because we're saying that everything has gotten
Yeah.
improved.
John's
but-
gonna go back to the map, to the graph. She was saying, why didn't we have a bullet on the key takeaway? We probably should have, but why don't you go back to the graph and actually see the math proficiency one? That's
I
SGP,
think you
so
want
keep
this
going.
one. So that, if you look at this one, the orange line at 10% is the math proficiency for the whole district. And then the change for 23-24 is up here in the right-hand corner, is a positive 2.04%. So, and again, that's just kind of how much further down the interstate we've made it this year.
So we made more gains in math in terms of growth, not proficiency.
Can I name something though?
Sure you can.
This is the only, well, this is the only one, the only subject when we think about, I'm just laying my equity lens on it, right? Or thinking about our priority or subgroups that are really struggling. Black students, the growth there, so 33%. If you look at the other graphs, they're on the opposite end, which means they're kind of regressing, right? And so I would say that not only having that core tier 1 curriculum is important, but we see how important and the impact it is really making for our students of color.
Absolutely.
Anyone else? Questions, comments? Yeah, it's wonderful kind of seeing like buds of growth in this data as compared to prior years. So I'm really excited to see what we have in store for us in future years.
Me too.
I'm excited too.
Yeah.
I'm actually excited about all the new. I know a lot of people kind of shy away from that. I feel like we're definitely a visionary district in looking at what really is needed and putting things in place to kind of help, especially our most vulnerable students who are most behind. So I know that comes with some challenges, and sometimes you have to go back before you can go forward. So that, you know, it's all a learning phase, and I think that as we look at all of the new pieces, the new staff that are coming in that are doing an awesome job, that we'll start to see some of those gains. It just takes a little bit of time. So I'm excited. All the new changes, all the new pieces, the 6th grade center coming, the DEI initiatives, the supports that we've put in place, the, you know, co-teaching, all of that is gonna, I think, make a big difference.
Yeah. We keep saying this is like our baseline year. You know, we, like John said, we moved around so many students, right? And it's hard to see that reflected in this data because a lot of the students are in different places now than is what is going to be reflected in the report card data. So next year is going to be really telling because it'll be everybody is planted where they're going to be, you know. And so then now from this point on, we'll get to kind of see, you know, Dr. Williams doesn't have 500 students anymore. Like they've had that intensive designation for the past couple years with 500 kids in their building. You know, now they are down to 300, 320, 350. That is a much more reasonable number. And so now what are they going to be able to do with that in terms of growing kids, right? And so Leo's got a different population of students now, but they have hit the ground running, and their principal, like Chastity said, has already been planning all kinds of growth initiatives around what they're going to do with the groups of students that they currently have. So yeah, so it is a shifting mindset year too. I think, you know, teachers have new students in front of them that they have not had before. We've got the multilingual students there in Yankee Ridge. So it's just, it is like a baseline year. So it is a great year for us to be kind of, like you said, with our equity initiatives, with our strategic planning coming. So it is a really great year for us to kind of kick off all these things all at the same time. So.
A kid might call it like a chess, the strategic moves that you make.
Oh yeah, yeah.
To win the game,
Yep.
and that's what we're trying to do.
And I would say I've seen lots of collaboration. Like
Oh,
there
yeah.
is so much collaboration happening because people are feeling that collective efficacy. Like, I don't know it either, but we all in this together. And so
Yes.
sometimes when people get in a groove, they can silo themselves. And so now I think because of all the new, we have so many people coming together for open gyms, for meeting with the coaches who come in and support some of the curriculum implementation work. Lots of the principals are working together with school improvement or getting ideas from each other as well. And so I just see lots of collaboration, which we know is going to be supportive for the adults, so they don't feel like it's as heavy because they're lifting together, but also for our student outcomes.
And I think that's what, with the walkthrough tool, I think that's what really helped with teachers being a little not as apprehensive about administrators because we're learning it too. Like, this is a learning point for all. We're all learning this new curriculum together, and we want to be in the spaces to learn it with them. So it put us all at the same starting point. Like, it put us all at the ground level together. So I think that's been really important, is that the teachers have seen we want to learn with them. Like, we're not up here trying, we're on the ground with them trying to learn all of this at the same time too, so.
I also would like to add that, and I concur with what Tori said, is that we're building a new foundation. Everything that
Absolutely.
we did last year was to build a much stronger foundation, so I think we're gonna be going,
I hope so.
we're gonna
Up,
really
up, up.
expand with all the different programs that were
Yeah.
initiated last year.
Yep. Yep.
Anyone else? All right, thank you. That concludes our study topics for this evening. It's not listed on our agenda, but there is a call for an executive session on the 20th for student discipline. Superintendent's report.
Okay. Thank you, Chastity. Yeah. All right, so, thank you. You too. So yesterday was Veterans Day, and at the beginning of our meeting, we acknowledged our veterans, and we had a couple of our schools who acknowledged veterans. I think these photos are from King School, and you can see one of the veterans there. We had activities at Yankee Ridge. They had a veterans breakfast where they had students who wrote Veterans Day cards that they delivered to veterans who they invited in. Dr. Williams had a Veterans Day assembly. Urbana Middle School had Veterans Day activities during lunch. I'm forgetting somebody. I can't remember. Somebody else but the schools were really doing a great job of recognizing veterans. And, it is a priority, right? When the district shifted to being in attendance during Veterans Day, we promised our veterans, our staff members who are veterans, we promised our community, we promised that we would acknowledge our veterans and we would honor their service on that day. And I'm glad that we are holding to that commitment and doing that. So thank you, and happy Veterans Day, everybody, yesterday. Coach of the Year. So this is Coach Amanda York, the UHS head girls swim coach, who was recognized by her peers as the sectional coach of the year. So she was voted on during the sectional meet this past weekend. So congratulations to Coach York. Oh, I didn't know that. So yay. A former alum from Urbana High School. So congratulations, Coach of the Year. You can go to the next one, John. Mamma Mia is starting this weekend. So Urbana High School Theater Fall Musical. So here are the dates, and you can order tickets online. And I think if you use the QR code on there, it'll also take you to the tickets as well. And here's some upcoming dates. November is Family Reading Night month. So we still have a couple of our schools left to have their Family Reading Night events. Thanksgiving break is coming up, and the Special Education Family and Staff Advisory Council is also happening on December 4th. I believe that is it. Oh, you can go back. She was going to take a picture. Okay.
We do have a set of completed FOIA requests. First up from Alexis Hahn. I heard from the customer they are interested in the pricing portion of the proposal and the scoring sheets. The other portions of the proposal are not of interest. From Tom Schroeder, I am requesting records documenting scheduled or completed in-person meetings, phone calls, and video calls involving 2 or more of the following: the district superintendent, board president, board vice president, and board secretary. These may be contained in calendars, schedules, visitor logs, call logs, user histories, or similar records held by either the district or relevant individuals. These records are requested from July 1st, 2023 to June 30th, 2024. From Dan Titulo, I am requesting any record of any kind that, 1, identifies what individual or group of people are considered the local school authority and are authorized to validate objections, and 2, instructs, informs, trains, guides the local school authority on how to determine whether information supplied on any such form constitutes a valid religious objection. From Megan Robinson, Champaign County Board, contract for sale of Brookings School site sold on December 16, 1985 to Electronic Decisions or University Microelectronics Center, owner Bill Hunsinger. From Tom Schroeder, I am requesting clear and legible copies of emails sent or received by the Director of Facilities between October 2022 and April 2023 that contain the phrases blues, hockey, or St. Louis. Our previously provided email from October 18, 2022 was unexplainably pixelated, so a readable replacement copy of reasonable quality is also being requested. And lastly, from Tom Schroeder, I am requesting all itemized invoices received by the district for legal services that were provided in the district between October 2023 and present. Next are board reports. I'd like to firstly acknowledge and thank NSCB for running our cameras again this evening. Any other board reports? Hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion to go after a 10-minute recess to clear the room. We entertain a motion to go into closed session for the purpose of the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees, specific individuals who serve as independent contractors, or specific volunteers of the district or legal counsel for the district, including hearing testimony on a complaint lodged against an employee, a specific individual who serves as an independent contractor, or a volunteer of the district, or against legal counsel for the district to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act. 5 ILCS 120/2C1 amended by PA 101-459. Is there somebody willing to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Been moved and seconded. Roll call, please. Oh, there will be no action after the closed session.
Member Hickson,
Yes.
Member Baxley,
Yes.
Member Langendorf, yes. Member Staton, President Pulowski,
Yes.
Vice President Exum.
Yes.
10-minute recess, and then we will be in closed session.